I don't think I love you no more. You never seem to call me lately, but I don't think she knew me at all.
Alright, so I haven't done a video in a couple of days, so I wanted to get back on here and do one. Everybody has their own thing. People that comment or do videos on making a murder, everybody has their own thing that they particularly like to cover. For instance, I like to cover the forensic evidence of the case. They have people that like to cover court documents and corruption within the police departments and, various numerous topics. I am fond of the forensic evidence side of this and always have been. That's not to say I won't venture off into other things. So, from time to time I will. And I actually have some things I'm planning to do with Mr. Paul and Thomas Myrtle. Looking at other things besides evidence. We haven't spoke at length about this, but me and Thomas is planning on, maybe doing a live chat series about the history of Manitowoc County, covering corruption, missing persons, that kind of thing. But today, I wanted to do a follow-up video about the bullet, because that's what I like to talk about, forensic evidence. So, I did a little research. I've been really trying to think of what this next video should be about, and my mind just keeps going back to this bullet. Now, one thing I want you to understand is whether or not you're somebody that thinks Stephen Avery is innocent or whether or not you think he is guilty, this is what is important to me. Alright, you have a bullet that's found, item FL, and they say that this bullet, the state says now, people can argue, you can argue whatever you want. Well, what if it was shot through soft tissue? Or what if it was this? Or what if it was that? Or what if it shot through a body, hit the concrete floor, went over here, ricocheted, back all the way over here, and landed on the compressor, whatever, and managed to have wood in it? You can argue whatever you want. But I'm just going to tell you what I think about item FL. Okay, I've been doing some experiments, and I'm going to do some more very soon. But what they're trying to tell you is that this bullet, in the video and in pictures, this bullet is basically just, whatever it was shot through is basically just mushed in, because the casing's not part of the bullet. So this little bullet here was just basically smushed in a little bit. Okay. And it supposedly had Teresa Halbach's DNA on it, and that bullet, now they didn't say, oh, it might have went through a soft tissue, or it might have went this. In the trial, they said they believe she was shot twice in the head. One of the wounds that they have, they claim to have her skull bones, and it has a hole in this part of the brain somewhere, and exiting, they show it exiting out of the back. That's their theory. That's not me sitting here. That's their theory. So I have problems with their theory. To begin with, let's look at these bullets. The bullets that Stephen Avery was using, according to the state, was CCI mini mags. Now, some notable information on this ammunition that he was using is that they typically travel 1,003 feet per second, 127 pounds of power at the muzzle, or whatever, however they judge that. Now, people have the misconception that a .22 bullet can travel up to the mile, and up to a mile, and that's what they always say. Now, that's true in a sense even though the NRA says it's actually shorter than a mile. But what you're not thinking of, what you're not taking into account, is the fact that that's assuming that the bullet would have enough room below it for the drop. Because after so many hundreds of yards, the bullet starts dropping tremendously throughout its trajectory. And they have graphs on the internet, you can pull it up and look at it, the ballistics of a .22 long rifle bullet. That's really irrelevant in our case because it is assumed and it is claimed by the state of Wisconsin that she was shot probably within a 10-foot distance. So trajectory, that type of thing, doesn't really come into factor. It doesn't come into play as a factor. So what I do want to look at is I don't have CCI mini mags, but what I have in the ballistic, I looked up on this ammo, 2 different kinds that I do have from Remington. They actually have more feet per second ratings. Okay, slightly, not by much, but slightly. I think these come in, the Full Metal Jackets are at 1,013 feet per second, and then the hollow points are, I want to say, like 1,010 feet per second of the Remington brand. But this is what I want to look at. This is a Remington .22 long rifle hollow point, and if you look, you see, the name is self-explanatory. Right in the center is hollow. This bullet is made to, when it goes into something, to flare out, right? Well, this bullet is a Full Metal Jacket. There's no hole. It's solid. It's a solid bullet. And this bullet, it's not made to do anything except go through what it's shooting, right? It typically has it's more aerodynamic as opposed to the hollow point. The hollow point catches air in that hole in flight. So that's why I believe that the Full Metal Jacket has more feet per second rating than the hollow point. Well, this is the only thing I have close enough to what Stephen Avery was using as far as brand and type, and because he was using CCI mini mag hollow points. All right. Now, I shot both of these bullets. I don't know if y'all watched my .22 experiment video, but I shot both of these bullets into those books. And when I shot the book in the video, I couldn't recover the bullet. I don't know where it went. But it did not exit the 3 books. So what I did is I redid the trial off video, I think the day after. And I was very surprised at what I found. So we're going to take a look. Now, the hollow point, when I shot it into the 3 books, this is what the bullet looked like when I recovered it from the books. Now, we're going to talk about the discrepancy in a minute, but this is what the bullet looked like. So it's hard for me to show you this on camera, but I'm going to show you. Completely flat. So you can see, this is the bullet. Completely flat, pancake. Full Metal Jacket. Now, the hollow point. Now, the Full Metal Jacket, essentially the same thing. Oh, crap, it's hard to show you this on camera. Essentially the same thing. 2 flat pieces. So now, this is what I want to argue. Now that you've seen that. Because, now this is my opinion. This is, I'm doing research into this. But this is my opinion. Because I shot these 2 bullets into something that the bullet couldn't pass through, all of its velocity was stopped inside of those books, and that's why it flattened out. Okay? For instance, if it had enough velocity, if it had enough power to travel through all the way through the books, then I'm convinced, so far from all the experiments that I've done, I'm convinced that it wouldn't be flattened out. The only reason why it flattened is because once it got to the point where it couldn't go no more, all the rest of its force just crumbled up behind it, right? Here's how this pertains to Stephen Avery's case. Item FL, in the pictures and everything we've seen of it, is not flat. Okay, it's round. It's almost as if you took this bullet right here and basically just took it with your finger, if this was something soft, and just pushed it in about halfway. It's the end of it, even under the telescope, on when they tested it, it's kind of rounded on the tip of it. So it's not flat. It's still kind of intact. Okay. So what I've been thinking about is that bullet, in my opinion, you can say whatever you want. You can say, well, maybe that wasn't the bullet, and if you think that he's guilty, well, he might have cleaned the actual bullets up, or whatever you want to say. But this is what I'm telling you. The bullet, in my opinion, would not be in that good of condition if it had been shot through hard skull bone, passed through 6 more, however many inches of brain tissue, and then back out the bone. Just that fact alone, I don't think that bullet would be in that condition, still round. No type of damage to the bullet. Okay? But to go even further and to elaborate on that, most guilters that do believe what the state says, that she was shot through the head with a bullet that came out of Stephen Avery's gun, to even go further, they want to say that because of Brendan Dassey's drawing that he drew the investigators, he laid out in the garage where the RAB was, where the lawnmower was, where Teresa's body was laying, where Stephen was standing, where he was standing, where everything was when he shot her. Okay? Well, they want you to believe that this bullet went through the skull, through the brain, back out of the skull, ricocheted off the concrete, went somewhere, and landed under the compressor. And apparently still had enough velocity on it to come in contact with wood for wood to get embedded in the bullet. I'm here to tell you, and you could put 1 and 2 together for yourself. I mean, I'm going to keep showing these throughout this video, because this is what a .22 bullet looks like shot into paper. Granted, it's compressed and it's 3 books back to back. It still begs to question that the bullet that they show was not shot through Teresa Halbach's head. It just wasn't. So when you take that into consideration, you say, well, what does it matter? Like, let's say, like Kratt said, well, let's say the key was planted. Let's put that aside, look at all the other evidence. Okay, well, I'm telling you that I just think it's highly unlikely that that bullet would be intact, still circular, and not have any damage from it, especially after hitting the concrete. Because you can imagine that force, even if the bullet was able to make it out of the skull, hitting the concrete would have smashed the bullet even further, maybe gave it a different shape from it hitting concrete. So the other thing that I was thinking about the bullet is, if you say, well, it doesn't matter. Well, it does matter. That would be the equivalent of the state. They say, let's say the state accused you of murdering somebody, and they say that you stabbed somebody with a knife and killed them. That would be the equivalent of the state presenting an axe at trial and claiming that's the knife that you killed this person with. You can't say if the key, well, maybe the police just bolstered the evidence and, okay, the key was planted, they planted Stephen's DNA on it. And then if you really look down the middle and not from either side, innocent or guilty, at the bullet, and you look at forensic evidence and you look at, ratings of different ammos and run your own experiments, you say the bullet has to be planted. And you can't turn around and say that, well, the bullet was, he shot her because the evidence shows in the skull bone, but they just wasn't able to recover the actual bullet, so they just bolstered the evidence by finding a bullet that was in the garage and put her DNA on it because he was guilty anyway. It doesn't work like that. It does not work like that. So, at what point do we, as people that want to know the truth, at what point do we start looking at these things and say, what's going to be done about this? Because the bullets, in my opinion, item FL in particular, is 100% fabricated. That bullet was shot through that garage. And the reason why it was still intact, primarily, is because, like in my book situation, it didn't have enough power to go all the way through, therefore it flattened itself out. But if you shot that bullet through a garage, just like Zellner and they did an experiment on their own, and they recovered fragments that looked really similar to item FL. So that bullet is so clearly shot through that garage, the one that they recovered. And the reason why it stayed intact is because once it shot through the siding of the garage, say plywood or whatever, there was nothing behind it to further smash the bullet flat because it went through the plywood but was contained inside the garage. So once it went through the plywood of the garage, it bounced around and wound up laying wherever they found it. Okay? And that's why most of the bullet was still intact, because it didn't meet an unmovable force. It went through its target, and that was it. It didn't meet something that it couldn't go through. That's why the bullet was still intact. So these issues are important. You can look at this, you can say whatever you want to say, but these issues are important. If you can prove that that bullet would not look like that being shot through a human head, or shot through a body in general, or shot in contact with a bone, or even if you could get me to believe that a 22 would go all the way through somebody's skull, the bullet shouldn't look like it looked. It should not still be basically intact with minor front end damage on it, and it still be circular. It shouldn't look like that. There should be more destruction to that bullet being shot through bone twice, going in and coming out. So, to me, I'm more and more convinced the more I look at this, the more I've been shooting here lately, doing experiments of my own. I'm more convinced that not only the key, not only the bullet, item FL, and the blood in the RAV4, especially by the ignition, all of those items are planted, in my opinion. At what point, 2 plus 2 is supposed to equal 4. Okay? And the state's wanting you to believe that 2 plus 2 equals 10, and 3 plus 3 equals 15, and all of this stuff. It doesn't make sense. At some point, the evidence that is produced against you in a court should make sense. It should add up. Like Zellner said many a times, once you find out the truth, everything adds up. But the problem is we have a very sticky situation to where it's going to be extremely hard to find out the truth. But in my opinion, the key was planted. It wasn't found until Andrew Colburn and Lieutenant Link was there. All of a sudden, the key pops up. The bullet fragment wasn't found until Link was there searching the garage. All of a sudden, the bullet is found. So, if you're planting evidence, you're doing it for a reason. Okay? And not to mention the blood patterns in the garage. There's no blood. So they're trying to convince you that she was shot in the head and all this, and there's no blood spatter, there's no DNA of Teresa Halbach anywhere in the garage other than on a bullet that they lied and said went through her skull. Didn't have bone embedded in it, and it shouldn't have looked as good as it did if it had come in contact with going through and through shot through a person's head. So I'm just not buying it. Now in the future, I want to do some videos. Like I mentioned earlier, me and Thomas Myrtle, we're going to do some videos on missing persons in Manitowoc County, corruption, potential cover-up stories, things of that nature. Me and Mr. Paul Capaldi was talking about a few things that we want to do on my channel and his channel as well. So we got a lot of stuff coming up, but I really wanted to do this video because I can't get the bullets out of my mind. It just, if something makes sense, then I let it go. But when things don't make sense, I cannot let it go. Item FL, among many other things in this case, does not make sense. Now, one other thing before I let y'all go, I'm also looking into the cell phone towers. It's unbelievably hard to find the information I'm looking for. But I want to do my own research off of what Zellner's already mentioned in the show about her pinging off of the Whitelaw, I believe it was called, cell phone tower. Because I have learned quite a bit about sectors on the towers and all those different type of things from the Jessica Chambers trial. Cell phones played a big part into that trial, and I've watched that trial 2 or 3 times. The analyst that presented all of that evidence in that trial, his testimony was like 3 or 4 hours long just on cell phone data. So I have learned a little bit about it, and that's one of the things I'm looking into now. I'm trying to find as much information as possible. But if she was indeed pinging off of the tower Zellner says she was, off of that sector, it'd be impossible for her phone to still be on the salvage yard. So those are just some things that I wanted to let y'all know about that I'm going to be working on. And make sure you share this video, subscribe to my channel, and give me a like. Let me know what you think in the comment section. And I will make a video and get back with y'all as soon as possible. Until then, y'all have a good day.